Welcome, this is Jim, host of the Faith Influencer podcast, where we're going to dive into discussions on faith's role in everyday life, from navigating blended families to overcoming challenges. I'm a husband, a father, a Bible teacher, an advocate for applying faith to everyday life. So tune in as I share personal stories, valuable insights, and practical wisdom. Welcome back to Faith Influencer. This is Jim Cunningham. One of the fastest ways to create chaos in a blended family is to not agree on your yeses and your nos. And those of you listening now know exactly what I'm talking about. If your kids don't take your no seriously, it's probably because your yes has no boundaries. This is a problem. Now, we're putting this in the under the umbrella of blended families because there's a little extra problem as it relates to blended families, but you know this is a problem with raising children in general, so it applies. Let me ask you this. Have you ever said yes just to keep the peace and paid for it later? I want to hear from some of you, and you will be honest enough to say, I was that kid. I was the kid who went around the boundaries of my family. And tell me what you feel about that now as you raise your children. So let's walk through this, and let me give you some blended family wisdom when it relates to when to use your yes and when to use your no. So parents who say yes to everything, do you know what you're really doing? You're creating chaos. Parents who say no to everything, you know what you're doing? You're creating distance. So there is a fine line between yes and no. You can't always say yes. You can't always say no. So parents who protect their yes and parents who protect their no raise healthy kids. So let's talk about how to have the right compromise between a yes and a no. And here's the question that every blended family needs to ask when it relates to yeses and nos. And here's my question for you pointedly. What do you reserve your yeses for? That's my question. What do you reserve your yeses for? And then on the other side, what do you reserve your nos for? So, because if you say yes to everything, your home is chaotic. And if you say no to everything, your kids stop coming to you. So let's get the right balance. Let me say, first of all, as we understand when to use yes and when to use no, is to grasp the concept that a yes and a no are leadership tools. Now, this is something I want to explain to you because in parenting, especially in blended families, when to use yes and when to use no, if you change the way you look at it and say, this is leadership, not just telling my kid whether they can do something or not, then it changes how you understand when to use it and when not. Now, let me explain what I'm talking about. When do you use no and yes as a leadership tool? Every time you say yes, this is what I want you to understand. Every time you say yes, you're not just allowing something, you're endorsing it, okay? Whenever you say yes, this is why it's a leadership tool. Whenever you say yes to your kids, whatever you're saying yes to, you are endorsing. So now let that change how you think about it. Are you saying yes to something that you don't endorse? Yes is a leadership tool. Let me take the other side. Every time you say no to your kid, you're not just stopping something, you're protecting something. So what are you saying no to? Or to reword it as a leadership tool, what are you protecting by your no? That's so big. That's leadership. That's the piece that I want you to grab, first of all, out of a yes and a no. So good parenting isn't just about rules. As a matter of fact, if you look at parenting as setting up a system of rules, I really think you're going down the wrong path. I don't want you to think of parenting as rules. It's about protecting, endorsing. It's about yeses, nos, but it's not about rules. Your yes should be reserved for things like this. Your yes should be reserved for things that build connection. It should be for things that have to do with trust, that have to do with growth. You should never reserve anything that in fact could damage character. As a matter of fact, this is what you do with your no's. You use your no's, you reserve them for things that's going to damage character, that's going to disrespect authority, that's going to harm the family, that's going to go against the values of the family. So why do I say this is for blended families especially? Because one of the things that we try to encourage you to do as a blended family in the very beginning is to sit down and lay out the values that are going to be the values for your home. Maybe a little different than my home or someone else's, but what are the values for your home? Once you create a value list for your home that's important for the two of you, then that's where you apply yes, and that's where you apply no. It must relate to your values. All right, yes and no is a leadership tool. Let's go to the next one. What should your yes be for specifically? As parents in a blended family, your yes should be generous towards things like this. Let me give you some examples. My yes is always going to be generous for time together. My son says, "Hey, Dad, you want to go throw the football?" Yes. "Hey, Dad, let's go." Yes. Yeses are generous when it comes to time together. How about conversation? It's yes. "Hey, Dad, let's talk about." Yes. "Hey, Dad, can I ask you a question?" Yes. Reserve them for conversations. Reserve your yeses for effort. Reserve them for trying again. "Dad, I blew this one. Can we?" Yes. Try again. Reserve your yes for forgiveness. "Dad, I disrespected you, and would you Yes. So your yeses are specific in your family, but you're reserving them for what I'm describing. That's where you use yes. Now, let me go against some of what some of you are doing. And as a matter of fact, this is something some of you are going to want your spouse to listen to, because it's one of the biggest problems that I hear in parenting and in blended families. Let me state it this way. Kids do not need a home where everything is allowed. Kids do not need a home where everything is allowed. They need a home where relationship is always available. That's what I'm talking about with yes. Now, let me go to the next one. When should you use your no? That's when you use your yes, what we just described. But how about your no? When should you use your no? Your no needs to be strong, but it needs to be in the right places. Your no should guard things like this. And remember, I said that your no is a protection element. When you say no, it's because you're protecting. Your no should be used for disrespect. "Hey, Dad, can I go out with my friend?" "You know, son, you used a tone with your mother earlier, so the answer is no." Use no when it comes to disrespect. Use no when it comes to dishonesty. Listen, use no when it comes to manipulation. This, again, is a big blended family issue, and I'm going to share it with you a little deeper in just a moment. Use no when it's going to divide parents against each other. Kids are so good at that. Kids know how to divide parents. They're little sinners, you realize, these kids of ours. They weren't born innocent. They're born little sinners. And so it is not hard for them to figure out on their own, without any training, how to divide their parents against each other. It's like it's sewn into them, and they will do it. Your kids will divide the two of you. You say, "Oh, my kids love me so much." And yeah, but you know what? So often, if they can divide you to get what they want, they will do it. So reserve your no's for when they're trying to divide you. Behavior that damages the peace in a home, has to be met with protection. That's a no. And then I had one other thing. Reserve your no's for dumb stuff. I don't know what falls into that. Just dumb stuff. Sometimes kids want to do dumb stuff, and I'm like, son, that's dumb. No, you're not doing that. So reserve your no for those reasons. Now I want to apply it to blended families. So I wish I could sit down with you right now at a kitchen table with a cup of coffee, and you would lean in and I would say, here is what's going to happen in your blended family. And I'm warning you now that this is going to happen. So take this warning that I'm about to give you and prepare for it before it happens, because it's going to happen. Boundaries are the hardest thing, if not one of the most difficult things for step parents and biological parents to get alignment. Now, let me say it again. One of the most difficult things in a blended family for a step parent and a biological parent to come to an agreement on is boundaries. It is alignment. It's because you've already had a life before this new marriage. And in that life before, chances are you had certain boundaries, you had a certain way of doing a thing, and now you've remarried. And your new partner has had a life before and a certain way of doing things. And now you're bringing this together. And it's so difficult to come into an alignment together. This is something, I'm 16 years into my blended family, 16 years in. And there are still times when we have to sit down and talk about alignment, about things that maybe go against our values or things that were important to us before, but for some reason, maybe we're letting them slip now. They're alignment. And it's almost always related some way or another to children, almost always. So I'm going to give you an example. I told you I was holding on to this one. Well, here it is. I call it the second ask. The second ask. This doesn't have to be in blended families, but I'll show you that it is even stronger in blended families. One of the things that happens in blended families for different reasons that we're going to talk about is that kids will ask the same question more than once, hoping to get a different answer from the other parent. The second ask. A child will go to one parent and ask them a question. And maybe that parent says no. This is manipulation. So what does that child do? That child goes to the next parent, the other parent, and they ask them the same question, hoping to get a new answer. Now, if you think that is cute, or if you think that's innocent, or if you think that doesn't need to be met with a very strong response, then you're misunderstanding what's going on. Anytime a child learns to manipulate, that is not a character quality you want them carrying on in life, because they will. Anytime a child is openly rebelling or causing division between two parents, causing division, you have to meet that harshly, quickly, firmly. That has to be met and dealt with. So, but here's what a kid will do. A kid will say, you know what? If I don't get the right answer from dad, I'm going to shop around till I get the different answer with mom. That's what they do. Now, again, I asked you earlier, how many of you were that kid and now you regret it? So here's a true story, because my older daughter probably won't listen to this. My oldest daughter started out where when she got in school and she's around some of her friends, that there were some things that she wanted to do. This is more towards when she was a teenager. And she got in this little streak where I discovered she was being a little manipulative. And when I discovered this, then I met it harshly and it didn't go over well with her, but I didn't care if it went over well with her. You see, when you have values in your family and you have alignment, it's not up for vote. It doesn't matter if your child throws a fit. It doesn't matter if your child thinks that you're old-fashioned and that these rules aren't the way my friends in there. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. It doesn't matter if they think you're being too harsh. Listen, your parenting and your values, that they're not up for what your kids don't decide. They don't get to decide. They have no say-so in how you're parenting. So my oldest daughter got into this scenario where she was wanting to manipulate. So this is what she did. Now, she was just turning 12 or 13. And she asked if she could stay all night with a girlfriend. And the girlfriend was in our church. And I thought it would be fine. I know the parents. But sometimes you get this gut feeling. And I had this gut feeling something was not going to work out like I wanted it to. So I said, okay, yes, you can. And I took her over to the friend's house and dropped her off. And it was already starting to turn dark. And I gave her instructions. Do not leave the house. And I pulled away. And you know what I did? Have you ever done this? I drove around the block and I came back around, and where I could see the house, I parked down the street. This is what you do as parents. Sometimes you have to. And sure enough, I just knew it. Sure enough, about 30 minutes later, out the door she came with her girlfriend, and down the street they are walking. Totally against what I said. So what was my response? What would your response be? Some of you would say, well, tomorrow when she comes home, we would sit down and have a talk about it. Are you kidding me? That's what your response would be? My response was, I started the car. I drove straight up to them walking down the street. Her eyes were so big, she was so shocked that I said, Mindy, get in the car. And she got in the car. And I told her friend to get in the car. And we turned around and drove back to her friend's house. I made both of them get out of the car, walked up to the front door, said to the girl, have your parents come out to the front porch. They came out to the front porch. I told them Mindy was not allowed to stay. And this is why. And these are the instructions I gave her, and we put her in the car, and I drove off. And she was horrified. For a moment, she wanted to challenge, but she knew better because she could see I was not playing around. You know what? That response was met with a very harsh no that she got for a long time. And I will go into what all happened after that. But I'm just telling you, our kids are going to do that kind of stuff. Now, let me take that a step further. So one parent says no, and the other parent is manipulated and says yes. Now, here's what happens in blended families. So here we are sitting at the kitchen table. I'm going to tell you this is going to happen. In blended families, sometimes the step parent, so if you're a step parent, lean in. Sometimes the step parent will go around their new spouse because they want acceptance from their new stepchildren, and they think it's funny to go against the no of their new spouse and say to their stepchildren, I know your dad told you that we couldn't go get ice cream, but he's on the phone. Y'all jump in the car. We're going to run and do it, and we'll get back real. You know what you're doing? You're going against the no and giving a yes. That's an alignment problem. That's a value problem, but you're doing it for acceptance. Now, some of you listening to that said, I wouldn't know. Do you know how often this happens? Do you know how often this happens? Let's just turn it around. A mom says no. A biological mom says no. And the kids are pouting and they say to their stepdad, Mom, I just said no. And I wanted to, and Mom said I couldn't have this. And you know what the stepdad would say? So, you know how many times I've heard this? The stepdad would say, okay, don't tell your mom, but go to your room. This is a real life story that I dealt with a family. The stepdad said, don't tell your mom, but go to your room and I'm going to go grab that and put it under my coat and I'll bring it up to your room. Something the mom said you cannot have. But the stepdad wanted acceptance. Do you know what he just did? He violated that home to an extent. You said, no, you're being too harsh. No, I'm not. Boundaries are the most difficult thing for blended families. And once the boundary lines are crossed and are erased, I'm not going to give you a high chance of making it. That's how big a deal it is. Once you violate each other's values and boundaries, and once the kids know that you're willing to do that, all hell is going to break loose in that family. And that's why blended families end in divorce rate so rapidly, because they don't understand boundaries, they don't understand alignment, and the mom and the dad don't have it together. That's what's going to happen. So, the healthiest homes, let me end with this. When it comes to blended families, when it comes to how to use your yes and your no, the healthiest homes are not the strictest homes. The healthiest homes are the most consistent. Say it again. Don't hear me saying that the healthiest homes in a blended family are the most strict. That is not true. The healthiest homes are the most consistent. And to be the most consistent, mom and dad have to be on the same page. And you do that before you bring your blended family together and you create your values and your boundaries. So keep your yes, keep your no for the right time. As always, thank you for joining Faith Influencer Podcast. I look forward to seeing you next time.